I can't resist any longer. Give me that thing between your legs. Uko's desperate plea echoed through the conference room, leaving both human and Deltan officials stunned into silence. Joseph Warren, Earth's top diplomat, felt his face flush as all eyes turned to him. This was not how he'd imagined his first day of negotiations on the Deltan homeworld would go. Hours earlier, Joseph had stepped off the interstellar transport, ready to secure a crucial trade deal between Earth and Delta Force. The Deltans, known throughout the galaxy for their stunning beauty and open sexuality, had welcomed the human delegation with their customary grace. Joseph had been briefed on Deltan culture, including their powerful pheromones and liberal attitudes toward physical intimacy. What no one had anticipated was the effect human pheromones would have on the Deltans. Uko, a high-ranking Deltan female assigned as Joseph's liaison, had greeted him with professional courtesy. Her silvery skin gleamed under the alien sun, and her large, expressive eyes studied Joseph with interest. As they walked to the negotiation chambers, Joseph noticed Uko becoming increasingly distracted. She kept glancing at him, her breath quickening, pupils dilating. Inside the conference room, Uko's behavior grew erratic. She shifted in her seat, unable to focus on the trade discussions. Joseph, oblivious to the effect he was having, continued his presentation on Earth's resource offerings. Sweat beaded on Uko's brow as she visibly struggled to maintain composure. The breaking point came during a recess. Uko approached Joseph, her usual self-control shattered. "You're sent," she gasped, trembling. "It's overwhelming. I've never experienced anything like this with non-Deltans." Before Joseph could respond, Uko's restraint crumbled completely, leading to her shocking outburst. Now, as silence gripped the room, Joseph's mind raced. This incident threatened to derail years of careful diplomacy. The Deltan officials looked mortified, while his own team appeared equally shocked. Joseph realized he was at the center of a potentially disastrous first contact situation. News of the incident spread quickly. Other alien races in attendance began eyeing the human delegation warily. If human pheromones could so drastically affect Deltans, what other unforeseen consequences might arise from close contact with Earth's population? Joseph's communicator buzzed. Earth's military leaders were already discussing the strategic implications of this newfound biological weapon. Scientists demanded samples for immediate study. The stakes had suddenly risen far beyond a simple trade negotiation. As Uko was led away by her concerned colleagues, Joseph knew he faced a monumental challenge. He had to salvage the negotiations, contain the diplomatic fallout, and navigate the complex ethical implications of this discovery. The future of humanity's place in the galactic community now rested on his shoulders. Joseph took a deep breath, his mind already formulating a plan. He'd come to Delta Fouri to secure humanity's future among the stars. Now he had to ensure that future didn't begin with an interstellar incident sparked by an alien's uncontrollable lust. The next few hours would determine whether humans would be seen as valuable trade partners or a dangerous biological threat to the galaxy at large. Joseph's mind raced as he considered his next move. The conference room buzzed with hushed whispers and shocked glances. He cleared his throat, preparing to address the stunned audience, when a firm hand gripped his shoulder. "Mr. Warren, please come with us," a stern-faced Deltan security officer said, flanked by two colleagues. "For everyone's safety, we must escort you to your quarters." Realizing the delicacy of the situation, Joseph nodded and followed without protest. As they left the room, he caught a glimpse of Uko being led away by medical staff, her silver skin flushed and her eyes wild with a mix of desire and confusion. Once in his quarters, Joseph paced restlessly. Hours ticked by as he fielded urgent communications from Earth. Military strategists demanded details about this potential biological weapon, while xenobiologists clamored for samples and data. Joseph felt the weight of an entire planet's expectations pressing down on him. A day later, a knock at his door heralded the arrival of Dr. Alara Voss, Earth's top xenobiologist. Her usually neat appearance was disheveled, likely from the rushed interstellar journey. "Mr. Warren," she said, her voice clipped and professional, "I've set up a lab in the Deltan Medical Facility. We need to get to the bottom of this pheromone reaction immediately." Joseph nodded, grateful for the reinforcements. "What's our next move, Doctor?" First, we need to resume negotiations, Dr. Voss replied. The Deltans have agreed to continue via holographic projections. It's not ideal, but it's better than nothing. The following days were a blur of frustrating negotiations. Joseph found himself speaking to flickering blue holograms of Deltan officials, their expressions hard to read through the wavering projections. Progress crawled at a snail's pace, with misunderstandings piling up due to the lack of face-to-face interaction. During a particularly tense exchange about resource allocation, Joseph's patience snapped. He muted the transmission and turned to his aide. This isn't working. We need to speak in person. Where's Uko? Despite protests from his team, Joseph slipped out of his quarters. He navigated the winding corridors of the diplomatic complex, relying on his memory from the initial tour. Finally, he spotted a flash of silver skin through an archway leading to a secluded garden. Uko stood alone among alien flora, her back to him. Joseph approached cautiously. Uko, it's Joseph. I think we need to talk. She turned, her large eyes widening in surprise and something else. Joseph, she breathed, her voice husky. You shouldn't be here. The suppression therapy, it's not fully effective. As they spoke, Joseph noticed subtle changes in Uko's demeanor. Her breathing quickened, pupils dilating. She took an involuntary step toward him, then caught herself. I should go, Joseph said, realizing the danger. But as he turned to leave, a new voice cut through the garden's tranquility. Well, what do we have here? Zarkon, the Rigelian diplomat, stood at the garden's entrance, his reptilian features twisted in a smirk. Before Joseph could explain, Zarkon raised his voice. Guards! The human is assaulting Ambassador Uko. Deltan security forces materialized from all directions, surrounding Joseph. Uko, overcome by the resurging effects of human pheromones, could barely speak in his defense. This is a misunderstanding, Joseph protested, hands raised. I was just trying to... Silence, human, the lead guard growled. You'll come with us now. Just as the guards moved to restrain Joseph, a commotion erupted at the garden's entrance. Dr. Voss burst onto the scene, clutching a data pad and looking frantic. Wait, she shouted. Don't arrest him. I can explain everything. Commander Thrax, head of Deltan security, pushed through the growing crowd of onlookers. His piercing gaze swept from Joseph to Uko, then to Dr. Voss. You have 1 minute to explain why I shouldn't arrest this human for violating our safety protocols and potentially assaulting a Deltan official, Thrax said, his voice low and dangerous. Dr. Voss stepped forward, her words tumbling out in a rush. It's not assault, Commander. My research shows that human sweat contains a compound that acts as a powerful aphrodisiac to Deltans. It bypasses your natural pheromone control mechanisms. That's why Ambassador Uko reacted so strongly. It's a biological reaction, not a deliberate action on Mr. Warren's part. A murmur ran through the crowd. Alien diplomats whispered among themselves, eyeing the humans with a mixture of fascination and wariness. Commander Thrax's eyes narrowed. And you have proof of this? Yes, right here, Dr. Voss said, thrusting her data pad forward. Full chemical analysis and preliminary Deltan physiological responses. We need further study, but the evidence is clear. Thrax studied the pad, his expression unreadable. Joseph held his breath, acutely aware of Uko's labored breathing nearby and the tense postures of the guards surrounding him. Finally, Thrax looked up. This is unexpected. Mr. Warren, you will return to your quarters immediately. Dr. Voss, I want a full briefing on your findings. The rest of you, he addressed the crowd, disperse now. This incident is under official investigation. As the guards escorted Joseph away, he caught a final glimpse of Uko being led in the opposite direction by medical staff. Their eyes met briefly, filled with a mixture of confusion, longing, and uncertainty. Joseph's mind whirled as he considered the implications of Dr. Voss's discovery. The trade negotiations, already on shaky ground, would need to be completely reevaluated. Earth's relationship with not just Delta IV, but the entire galactic community hung in the balance. As he reached his quarters, Joseph's communicator buzzed with an incoming transmission from Earth High Command. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for the difficult conversations ahead. The true challenge of navigating this unprecedented diplomatic minefield was only just beginning. Joseph's finger hovered over the communicator, bracing for the barrage of questions from Earth High Command. A sharp knock at the door interrupted his mental preparations. "Mr. Warren, your presence is required immediately." Commander Thrax's authoritative voice carried through the door. Surprised by the sudden summons, Joseph straightened his disheveled clothing and opened the door. The Deltan security chief's stern expression betrayed a hint of urgency. "Follow me," Thrax ordered, already striding down the corridor. Joseph fell in step, his mind racing. "Commander, what's going on?" "Dr. Voss has requested an emergency meeting. She claims to have crucial information regarding the incident." They arrived at a spacious conference room where Dr. Voss stood before a holographic display, her fingers dancing across a data pad. Uko sat nearby, her silver skin flushed, and her gaze darting nervously between Joseph and the floor. As Joseph entered, the room's atmosphere shifted palpably. Uko's breath hitched, her pupils dilating visibly. Thrax's posture stiffened, his hand instinctively moving to his weapon. Dr. Voss broke the tension, launching into her explanation without preamble. "Commander, I've isolated the compound in human sweat responsible for the Deltan reaction. It's a previously unknown pheromone that—" A commotion outside the room cut her off. The doors burst open, admitting a wave of pungent, sweet-smelling air. Joseph's eyes watered at the intensity. Zarkon, the Rigelian diplomat, stood in the doorway, a shattered vial at his feet. His reptilian features twisted into a malicious grin. "Enjoy your little gathering?" he hissed before darting away. The effect was instantaneous. Uko let out a strangled gasp, her body trembling violently. Thrax's usual stoic demeanor crumbled as he gripped the edge of the conference table, his fingers tightening. "Deltan pheromone concentrate," Dr. Voss shouted, her eyes wide with realization. "Everyone, we need to evacuate now." But it was too late. The concentrated pheromones spread rapidly through the building's ventilation system. Screams and moans echoed from the corridors as Deltan officials and staff succumbed to the overwhelming arousal. Joseph's mind raced, adrenaline sharpening his focus. "Dr. Voss, do you have any pheromone suppressants?" The xenobiologist nodded, producing a small case from her bag. "But they're experimental, untested against concentrations this high." "It's our only shot," Joseph said, grabbing the case. He turned to Thrax, who was visibly struggling to maintain control. "Commander, we need to distribute these throughout the complex." Thrax nodded weakly, tapping his communicator with shaking fingers. He barked orders to his security team, his voice strained. Joseph organized the human delegation members who had gathered outside the conference room, assigning them sectors of the building to cover. They moved swiftly, administering the suppressants to every Deltan they encountered. But as Joseph reunited with Dr. Voss in the main atrium, her expression confirmed his fears. "It's not working," she said, gesturing to the chaos around them. Deltans writhed on the floor, clawing at their clothes and each other, completely lost to their primal urges. A distant part of Joseph's mind noted the absence of Uko, hoping she had found safety. He pushed the thought aside, focusing on the crisis at hand. "There has to be something we can do." Dr. Voss's eyes lit up with a dangerous idea. "Your pheromones," she said. "They had a profound effect on the Deltans before. If we could introduce a high enough concentration, it might counteract the Deltan pheromones." Joseph didn't hesitate. He stripped off his shirt, exposing his sweat-slicked skin to the air. "Tell me what to do." "Move through the crowd," Dr. Voss instructed. "Try to get as close to as many Deltans as possible. Your sweat should disperse the human pheromones effectively." Joseph nodded, steeling himself before plunging into the mass of writhing silver bodies. The heat and the sweet scent of Deltan pheromones were overwhelming. He pushed forward, his skin brushing against the Deltans as he moved. The change was subtle at first. A few Deltans nearest to Joseph paused in their frenzy, their wild eyes focusing on him with sudden clarity. As he continued through the crowd, the effects spread like ripples in a pond. The uncontrolled moans and screams quieted, replaced by a collective sigh. Deltans, who had been tearing at each other moments before, now turned their full attention to Joseph, their expressions a mix of awe and intense fascination. Joseph's heart pounded as he realized the plan was working. He continued his path through the atrium, feeling hundreds of eyes tracking his every move. The Deltan's behavior had shifted dramatically, from unrestrained lust to an almost reverent calm. Commander Thrax, having regained his composure, seized the opportunity. He and his security team moved efficiently through the docile crowd, restoring order and providing medical attention where needed. As the situation stabilized, Joseph spotted movement at the far end of the atrium. Zarkon, realizing his plan had backfired, attempted to slip away unnoticed. Joseph's eyes narrowed. "There!" he shouted, pointing at the fleeing Rigelian. Thrax reacted instantly, dispatching a mixed team of human and Deltan security personnel. They converged on Zarkon, cutting off his escape routes. The Rigelian diplomat snarled, reaching for a concealed weapon, but found himself quickly overwhelmed and subdued. As Zarkon was led away in restraints, Joseph felt a gentle touch on his arm. He turned to find Uko standing beside him, her silver skin glowing with a soft sheen of sweat, her large eyes filled with a complex mix of emotions. "Joseph," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, we owe you a great debt. Your actions today have saved us from unimaginable embarrassment and possibly prevented a diplomatic catastrophe." Before Joseph could respond, Dr. Voss approached, her expression a mix of excitement and professional curiosity. "Mr. Warren, the data we've gathered from this incident is extraordinary. The interaction between human and Deltan biochemistry opens up an entirely new field of study. We're calling it xenopheromology." Joseph nodded, suddenly aware of his state of undress and the countless eyes still fixed upon him. He cleared his throat, addressing Uko and the gathered Deltan officials. "I believe we have much to discuss regarding the future of human-Deltan relations." Uko's eyes sparkled with a new intensity. "Indeed we do, Joseph. Indeed we do." As the group moved towards a more private meeting room, Joseph couldn't help but feel that the true challenges of this unprecedented diplomatic situation were only beginning to unfold. As Joseph and the Deltan officials filed into the meeting room, he couldn't shake the feeling that this incident would have far-reaching consequences beyond anything they could imagine. Weeks later, Joseph found himself aboard the Nexus, a state-of-the-art space station orbiting Delta IV. The station housed the newly established Xenobiological Interactions Department, or XID, where human and Deltan scientists worked tirelessly to unravel the mysteries of their unique biochemical relationship. Dr. Alara Voss's voice echoed through the laboratory as Joseph stepped into the testing chamber. "All right, Mr. Warren, we're ready to begin. Remember, this is a controlled experiment to measure the potency of your pheromones at varying concentrations." Joseph nodded, his heart rate quickening as the sealed doors hissed shut behind him. He took his position in the center of the room, surrounded by an array of sensors and monitoring equipment. "Initiating pheromone collection," Dr. Voss announced. A soft whirring filled the air as the chamber's atmospheric processors activated. Joseph closed his eyes, focusing on regulating his breathing. He'd been through this process dozens of times over the past few weeks, but it never got easier. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him, knowing that his body's chemicals held the key to unraveling a biological puzzle with massive diplomatic implications. Suddenly, a piercing alarm shattered the calm. Joseph's eyes snapped open as red warning lights bathed the chamber in an ominous glow. "Ventilation malfunction," Dr. Voss's voice crackled over the intercom, tight with concern. "Pheromone concentrations are spiking beyond safety parameters. We're initiating emergency shutdown." Before Joseph could respond, a rush of movement caught his eye. Lyra, a young Deltan research assistant, burst into the chamber. Her silver skin glistened with sweat, her eyes wide and unfocused. "Lyra, no!" Joseph shouted, but it was too late. The doors sealed behind her, trapping them both in the pheromone-saturated air. Lyra stumbled forward, her breath coming in short gasps. I couldn't stop myself," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Something's happening to me, Joseph." As Joseph watched in stunned silence, Lyra's skin began to change. A soft, ethereal glow emanated from beneath her silvery epidermis, pulsing in rhythm with her rapid heartbeat. The bioluminescence spread across her body like a wave, transforming her into a being of living light. Incredible, Dr. Voss's awestruck voice came through the speakers. We're seeing cellular changes unlike anything in our previous observations. Lyra's dormant genes are activating in response to the concentrated pheromones. Joseph approached Lyra cautiously, his own skin tingling from the high concentration of chemicals in the air. "Are you in pain?" he asked, searching her glowing face for signs of distress. Lyra shook her head, her luminous eyes fixed on Joseph with an intensity that made his breath catch. "No pain," she murmured, "but everything feels different, heightened, like I'm experiencing the world through new senses." The chamber doors finally slid open, and a team of medical staff rushed in, led by Dr. Voss. They quickly escorted Lyra to the medical bay, leaving Joseph to grapple with the implications of what had just occurred. Hours later, Joseph sat in Dr. Voss's office, his legs shaking from the debriefing. Lyra's transformation had unlocked a Pandora's box of scientific and diplomatic challenges. "The genetic changes aren't stable," Dr. Voss explained, her face grave as she studied the holographic display of Lyra's DNA. "The activation of these dormant genes is causing accelerated cellular degradation. If we can't find a way to stabilize her condition—" She left the sentence unfinished, but Joseph understood the gravity of the situation. Lyra's life hung in the balance, and the implications for Deltan-human relations were staggering. A gentle chime interrupted their discussion. The office door slid open, revealing Ambassador Uko. Her silver skin seemed to shimmer with terrifying excitement as she entered. "Joseph, Dr. Voss," Uko greeted them, her melodious voice tinged with urgency. "I've just received word from the Deltan Council. They've approved my proposal for an intimate cultural exchange program." Joseph's eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Intimate cultural exchange?" Uko nodded, her large eyes sparkling. "A program pairing human and Deltan volunteers for close cohabitation and potential intimate relations. We believe it's the next logical step in understanding the full extent of our compatibility." Before Joseph could process this new development, his personal communicator buzzed. The message displayed made his blood run cold. "Alert! Unauthorized access detected in DNA storage facility. Security breach in progress." As Joseph opened his mouth to warn the others, the station's alarms blared to life. Commander Thrax's voice boomed over the intercom. "Attention, all personnel. We have intruders on board. This is not a drill. Security teams to all critical areas immediately." Joseph exchanged a look of alarm with Dr. Voss and Ambassador Uko. The research station had become a powder keg of scientific discovery, diplomatic ambition, and now, unknown threats. As they rushed from the office to confront this new crisis, Joseph couldn't shake the feeling that the true test of his skills in the future of human-Deltan relations was only just beginning. As they rushed from the office to confront this new crisis, Joseph's mind raced with the implications of the security breach. The corridors of the Nexus buzzed with frantic activity as security personnel mobilized. Joseph, Dr. Voss, and Ambassador Uko made their way to the Central Command Center, dodging panicked researchers and technicians. "We need to secure the DNA storage facility," Joseph said, his voice tight with urgency. "If someone's after our research—" Dr. Voss nodded grimly. "The implications could be catastrophic. We've barely scratched the surface of understanding the human-Deltan biochemical interactions." As they entered the command center, Commander Thrax's imposing figure loomed over a holographic display of the station. His silver skin gleamed under the harsh emergency lighting as he barked orders to his security teams. "Report," Thrax demanded as he noticed their arrival. "Sir," a young Deltan officer responded, her fingers flying over a control panel. "We've detected multiple intruders in the lower levels. They're using some kind of advanced cloaking technology. We're having trouble tracking their movements." Joseph's stomach clenched. "The DNA storage facility is on the lower levels." Thrax's eyes narrowed. "We need to contain this threat immediately. Mr. Warren, given your unique Abilities. I believe you could be of assistance. Before Joseph could respond, a piercing alarm cut through the air. Dr. Voss rushed to a nearby console, her face paling as she read the incoming data. It's Lyra, she gasped. Her condition is deteriorating rapidly. The cellular degradation is accelerating beyond our initial projections. Joseph felt as if the floor had dropped out from beneath him. The young Deltan researcher's transformed state flashed before his eyes, her silvery skin aglow with otherworldly bioluminescence, a direct result of her exposure to his pheromones. How long does she have? He asked, dreading the answer. Dr. Voss's voice was barely above a whisper. Hours, maybe less. A heavy silence fell over the room, broken only by the persistent wail of the alarms. Joseph looked from Dr. Voss to Commander Thrax, then to Ambassador Uko, whose large eyes were filled with a mix of fear and hope. In that moment, Joseph made a decision that would change the course of human-Deltan relations forever. We need to stabilize her condition, he said, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. And I think I know how. Dr. Voss's eyes widened as she grasped his meaning. The bonding procedure? But Joseph, it's completely untested. The risks are less than the certainty of Lyra's death if we do nothing, Joseph finished. He turned to Commander Thrax. Can you handle the security situation without me? The Deltan commander nodded solemnly. We'll do what we must to protect the station and its research. Go, save her life if you can. As Joseph and Dr. Voss rushed towards the medical bay, Ambassador Uko fell into step beside them. I'm coming with you, she said, her melodious voice tinged with perseverance. This could have profound implications for our peoples. The medical bay was a flurry of activity when they arrived. Lyra lay on a biobed, her once radiant skin now pale and sickly. The bioluminescence that had marked her transformation flickered weakly, like a dying star. Dr. Voss immediately began preparing the specialized medical chamber, her movements quick and precise despite the pressure. Joseph will need to expose you to a calibrated mixture of human and Deltan pheromones. It should facilitate a temporary biological bond between you and Lyra. Joseph nodded, his heart pounding as he watched the chamber's door slide open. He stepped inside, the cool air raising goosebumps on his skin. Are you ready? Dr. Voss asked, her finger hovering over the activation switch. Joseph took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. Do it. The chamber hummed to life, and a fine mist began to fill the air. Joseph's nostrils flared as he inhaled the pheromone mixture. Almost immediately, he felt a tingling sensation spread across his skin. Through the chamber's transparent walls, he saw Lyra being carefully transferred to an adjacent compartment. As the two chambers connected, Joseph felt a jolt of energy course through his body. The sensation intensified, building to a crescendo of physical and mental stimulation. Joseph gasped as his cells seemed to vibrate with newfound energy. His vision blurred, and he felt as if his consciousness was expanding beyond the confines of his body. In the connected chamber, Lyra's body arched, her bioluminescence flaring to life with renewed vigor. The pulsing glow synchronized with Joseph's heightened biorhythms, creating a mesmerizing light show. Dr. Voss and her team watched in awe, furiously recording data as the bonding process reached its peak. Ambassador Uko stood transfixed, her large eyes reflecting the shimmering light emanating from the chambers. Suddenly, Joseph felt a profound shift in his awareness. It was as if a veil had been lifted, allowing him to perceive the world through Lyra's senses. He could feel the ebb and flow of her cellular processes, the frantic struggle of her body to maintain equilibrium. With an instinct he didn't fully understand, Joseph focused his will on stabilizing Lyra's condition. He visualized his own robust cellular structure, imagining it as a template for Lyra's failing systems. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Lyra's erratic life signs began to stabilize, her bioluminescence settling into a steady, healthy glow. At the same time, Joseph felt a strange tingling across his skin. He looked down in amazement to see his own body beginning to emit a faint, silvery light. As the bonding process reached its conclusion, Joseph felt a wave of exhaustion wash over him. The last thing he saw before losing consciousness was Dr. Voss's face, her expression a mix of scientific excitement and deep concern. When Joseph awoke, he found himself lying on a biobed in the medical bay. The events of the bonding procedure came rushing back to him, and he sat up abruptly, ignoring the wave of dizziness that accompanied the movement. "Lyra," he called out, his voice hoarse. "She's stable," Dr. Voss's reassuring voice came from nearby. The scientist approached his bed, her eyes alight with almost unchecked excitement. "Joseph, what you've done is nothing short of miraculous. Lyra's cellular degradation has completely halted." Relief flooded through Joseph, quickly followed by a dawning awareness of the changes in his own body. He held up his hands, marveling at the faint bioluminescent glow that pulsed just beneath his skin. Before he could fully process this development, the medical bay doors slid open with a hiss. Commander Thrax burst in, his expression grim. "We have a situation," the Delton security chief announced. "During the procedure, we detected unauthorized access to our systems. Someone was siphoning off data and collecting samples of the pheromone mixture." Joseph's blood ran cold as the implications sank in. Their groundbreaking research, with all its potential for both healing and harm, was now in unknown hands. As if on cue, the station's alarms began to blare once more. Commander Thrax's communicator crackled to life, filling the room with a frantic voice. "Sir, we've spotted the intruders. They're making a break for the docking bay." Joseph swung his legs off the biobed, ignoring Dr. Voss's protest. "We can't let them escape with that data," he said, his voice firm with determination. As they rushed from the medical bay, Joseph caught a glimpse of his reflection in a polished panel. His eyes widened at the sight of his subtly altered appearance, the faint silvery glow of his skin, the heightened awareness in his gaze. He realized that the bonding procedure had changed him in ways he was only beginning to understand. And now, with unknown adversaries in possession of their research, the stakes had never been higher. Joseph, Dr. Voss, and Commander Thrax raced towards the docking bay, the future of human-Deltan relations hanging in the balance with every step they took. The docking bay doors loomed ahead, their massive frames vibrating with the urgency of the station's alarms. As they rounded the final corner, Joseph caught sight of the intruders. 3 figures in sleek, dark suits were making a mad dash for a small, unmarked shuttle. Their movements were unnaturally swift and fluid, betraying the presence of advanced technology. "Stop!" Commander Thrax's voice boomed across the bay, but the intruders showed no signs of slowing. Joseph's newly enhanced senses kicked into overdrive. He could perceive minute details with startling clarity, the slight shimmer of the intruders' cloaking devices, the faint trail of disrupted air in their wake. Without thinking, he broke into a sprint, his body moving with a grace and speed he'd never experienced before. The lead intruder had just reached the shuttle's airlock when Joseph's hand clamped down on their shoulder. In one fluid motion, he spun the figure around, coming face to face with a mask of impenetrable black material. For a split second, time seemed to stand still. Then chaos erupted. The intruder lashed out with inhuman speed, but Joseph's newly heightened reflexes allowed him to dodge the blow. As they grappled, Joseph caught glimpses of the other 2 intruders boarding the shuttle, clutching data drives and sample containers. "Joseph!" Dr. Voss's voice cut through the commotion. "We can't let them leave with those samples." With a surge of strength, Joseph managed to tear the mask from his opponent's face. He stumbled back in shock as he found himself staring into eyes that glowed with an eerie, familiar bioluminescence. Before he could process this revelation, a blinding flash erupted from the shuttle. Joseph felt himself being thrown backward, his enhanced senses overwhelmed by the intensity of the light and sound. When his vision cleared, the shuttle was gone, leaving behind only the acrid smell of burned ozone and 1,000 unanswered questions. The aftermath of the research station incident unfolded with dizzying speed. Within hours, news of the security breach and the unauthorized military operation had reached the highest levels of both human and Deltan leadership. Joseph found himself at the center of a diplomatic storm. His residual bioluminescence, a visible reminder of the profound impact of human-Deltan interactions, made him a subject of intense scrutiny and debate. As he stood before the hastily convened Joint Committee of Human and Deltan officials, Joseph could feel the weight of countless eyes upon him. His skin still emitted a faint silvery glow, pulsing gently in rhythm with his heartbeat. Mr. Warren, a stern-faced Deltan counselor addressed him, can you explain the exact nature of the procedure that resulted in your current condition? Before Joseph could respond, Ambassador Uko stepped forward. Her melodious voice carried a note of commitment as she addressed the committee. Honored delegates, she began, I believe that in light of recent events, transparency is our best course of action. To that end, I propose an unprecedented solution. The room fell silent as Uko outlined her proposal, a public demonstration of human mating practices, with herself and Joseph as the participants. The shock was palpable, rippling through the assembled officials like a physical wave. Ambassador Uko? A human representative sputtered. Surely you can't be serious? This goes against every established diplomatic protocol. Uko's large eyes shimmered with conviction. We stand at a crossroads. Fear and misinformation threaten to undo years of progress in human-Deltan relations. Only by embracing radical transparency can we hope to move forward. As the committee erupted into heated debate, Joseph's attention was drawn to Dr. Alara Voss, who had just entered the chamber. Her face was flushed with excitement, her eyes bright with the fervor of scientific discovery. Joseph, she whispered urgently, pulling him aside, I've made a breakthrough in analyzing the bonding process data. You're not going to believe this. Dr. Voss quickly outlined her findings. The genetic changes triggered in Deltans by human pheromones followed a specific, non-random pattern. This pattern suggested something that would shake the very foundations of Deltan society. Are you saying, Joseph asked, his mind turning, that Deltan physiology might have been engineered by some ancient alien race? Dr. Voss nodded, her voice low but intense. A race that was seeking to create a species compatible with their own biology. Joseph, this could rewrite everything we thought we knew about Deltan evolution. Their hushed conversation was interrupted by a commotion at the chamber's entrance. Admiral Krath, his silver skin gleaming with barely held back fury, stormed into the room. This farce has gone on long enough, he bellowed, his voice cutting through the ongoing debate. The human threat to our genetic purity is clear. We must act now to preserve the integrity of our species. As Krath's words ignited a fresh wave of argument, Joseph caught sight of a familiar face entering the chamber. Ambassador Zorn, the respected diplomat from the Galactic Council, had arrived with their delegation. The ambassador's alien features were impassive as they surveyed the chaotic scene. With a gesture, they silenced the room. It seems, Zorn's multi-tone voice reverberated through the chamber, that we have arrived at a crucial moment. The Galactic Council will now convene a formal hearing to assess the situation. As the delegates began to file out following Ambassador Zorn, Joseph felt a gentle touch on his arm. He turned to find Uko beside him, her large eyes filled with a mixture of persistence and something deeper, more personal. Joseph, she said softly, whatever happens next, know that I believe in the potential of our peoples to come together. We must not let fear dictate our future. Joseph nodded, acutely aware of the faint glow emanating from his skin and the complex web of emotions and politics that now surrounded him. As he prepared to follow the others to the Galactic Council hearing, he couldn't shake the feeling that the true test of human-Deltan relations was only just beginning. The station's corridors buzzed with tension as delegates, scientists, and security personnel made their way to the Grand Assembly Hall. Joseph walked beside Uko and Dr. Voss, their footsteps echoing in the charged silence. As they entered the vast chamber, Joseph's enhanced senses were immediately overwhelmed. The air was thick with a cocktail of pheromones, fear, anticipation, anger, and curiosity mingling in an invisible cloud. The assembled crowd was a testament to the gravity of the situation, with representatives from dozens of species filling the tiered seats. Ambassador Zorn took their place at the center of the raised dais, flanked by members of the Galactic Council. Their multifaceted eyes swept across the room, settling briefly on Joseph. We are gathered here, Zorn began, their voice resonating with authority, to address the unprecedented situation that has arisen from human-Deltan interactions. We will hear testimony from key individuals involved in recent events. As the proceedings began, Joseph found himself called to the witness stand. He could feel the weight of countless alien gazes upon him, studying his faintly glowing skin with a mixture of fascination and apprehension. "Mr. Warren," Ambassador Zorn addressed him, "please describe for the Council the nature of your transformation and its implications for human-Deltan relations." Joseph took a deep breath, acutely aware of the importance of his words. As he began to speak, detailing the bonding procedure and its aftermath, he felt a sudden surge of energy coursing through his body. To the astonishment of the assembled delegates, Joseph's residual bioluminescence flared to life with renewed intensity. His skin pulsed with waves of silvery light, casting dancing shadows across the chamber. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. Joseph caught sight of Admiral Krath, his face contorted with a mixture of disgust and triumph, as if this display only confirmed his worst fears. Before Joseph could continue his testimony, a commotion erupted near the chamber's entrance. A group of Deltan security officers burst in, their faces grim with urgency. "Forgive the interruption," the lead officer addressed Ambassador Zorn, "but we have a critical situation. A genetically engineered virus has been released into the station's air filtration system." The chamber erupted into chaos as the implications sank in. Dr. Voss leaped to her feet, her face pale with shock. "This virus," she called out, her voice cutting through the panic, "does it target individuals with hybrid human-Deltan physiology?" The security officer nodded grimly. "Initial analysis suggests so. We've already detected cases among those exposed to human pheromones." Joseph's mind raced. Lyra, still recovering from her near-death experience, would be vulnerable, and he himself, with his altered physiology, could be at risk. Ambassador Zorn's voice boomed across the chamber, restoring a semblance of order. "This station is now under quarantine. No one leaves until we fully understand the nature of this threat." As the reality of their situation sank in, Joseph caught Uko's eye across the room. Her expression was one of dedication and something more. In that moment, he realized that their fates were now inextricably linked, not just as representatives of their species, but as individuals facing an uncertain future. Dr. Voss was already mobilizing her team, barking orders into her communicator as she rushed towards the exit. "We need to get to the lab immediately. Every second counts if we're going to develop a cure." As the chamber descended into a flurry of activity, Joseph felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned to find Ambassador Uko beside him, her eyes shimmering with a mix of fear and drive. "Joseph," she said, her voice low and intense, "I have an idea. It's risky, but it might be our best chance at countering this virus." Before she could elaborate, alarms began blaring throughout the station. The virus was spreading faster than anyone had anticipated, and time was running out. Joseph looked from Uko to the chaos unfolding around them, aware that the next few hours would determine not just their personal fates, but the future of human-Deltan relations, and perhaps the stability of the galaxy itself. With his skin still glowing and his enhanced senses on high alert, he steeled himself for the challenges ahead. Joseph took a deep breath, his mind racing with the implications of Uko's words. The alarms blaring throughout the station only heightened his sense of urgency. "What's your idea, Uko?" he asked, leaning in close to hear her over the din. Uko's eyes shimmered with intensity as she explained, "We need to create an antibody against this virus. I believe we can do it by exposing me to controlled doses of human pheromones while stimulating my Deltan physiology." Joseph's eyes widened. "That's incredibly risky. Are you sure?" "We don't have a choice," Uko replied, her voice firm. "Every moment we hesitate, more lives are at risk." Without further discussion, they sought out Dr. Voss, who was already mobilizing her team. Upon hearing Uko's proposal, the scientist's face lit up with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "It's dangerous, but it might just work," Dr. Voss said, her fingers flying over a data pad as she input calculations. "We'll need to prepare a specialized medical chamber immediately." As the medical team scrambled to set up the necessary equipment, Joseph found himself watching the organized chaos with a sense of detachment. His skin continued to pulse with a soft, silvery glow, a constant reminder of his own altered physiology. Within minutes, Uko was being connected to an array of monitoring devices inside a hastily prepared medical chamber. Joseph stood by, his enhanced senses picking up the subtle changes in her body chemistry as the procedure began. Dr. Voss's voice was tense as she supervised the process. Initiating pheromone exposure now. Uko, how do you feel? I'm fine, Uko replied, her voice strained. It's intense, but I can handle it. As the treatment progressed, Joseph watched in awe as Uko's body began to emit a bright bioluminescence, reminiscent of his own experience with Lyra. The medical team's eyes were glued to the monitoring equipment, tracking every fluctuation in Uko's vital signs. Her body is struggling to adapt, Dr. Voss muttered, her brow furrowed in concentration. But the antibody production is accelerating. This might actually work. Meanwhile, the station's corridors were filled with panicked diplomats and staff. Joseph caught snippets of conversation as he passed. Several members of the Galactic Council delegation were already showing symptoms of the virus. Ambassador Zorn's multi-tone voice echoed through the station's communication system, urging calm and cooperation. We are implementing strict containment protocols. Please remain in your designated areas until further notice. As Uko's condition began to stabilize, Dr. Voss and her team moved swiftly to extract and synthesize the newly created antibodies. The initial tests showed promising results, but a new problem emerged. We need a way to distribute the cure quickly throughout the station, Dr. Voss said, frustration evident in her voice. Joseph's diplomatic instincts kicked in. What about using the station's air filtration system? It's how the terrorists spread the virus in the first place. Dr. Voss's eyes lit up. Brilliant. We'll need to work with the station's engineers to modify the air handling units. As the team raced against time to implement this plan, alarms once again blared throughout the station. Joseph's enhanced hearing picked up the sound of weapons fire in the distance. A security officer burst into the lab, his face pale. We're under attack. A group of Deltan extremists is trying to seize the command center. Joseph's mind raced, assessing the situation. Without hesitation, he stepped forward. I have an idea. My appearance might be useful as a distraction. Despite protests from Dr. Voss and Uko, Joseph set his plan in motion. Using his glowing skin as a beacon, he drew the attention of the extremists away from the command center, allowing station security and loyal Deltan forces to mount a counteroffensive. The next few hours passed in a blur of action. As Joseph led the extremists on a wild chase through the station's corridors, he could hear the sounds of battle echoing around him. His enhanced reflexes allowed him to stay just out of reach, keeping the attackers focused on him rather than their original objective. Meanwhile, Dr. Voss and her team worked feverishly to release the aerosolized antibodies into the air filtration system. As the cure began to circulate, infected individuals started showing signs of improvement. The extremist attack was ultimately repelled, but not without cost. Joseph saw several injured security personnel and scientists being rushed to the medical bay as he made his way back to check on Uko and Dr. Voss. He found Uko in the medical bay, weakened but recovering. Her skin still carried a faint glow, a visible reminder of her sacrifice. As their eyes met, Joseph felt a deep connection that transcended their biological differences. "Thank you," he said simply, taking her hand in his. Uko's response was interrupted by the arrival of Ambassador Zorn. The alien diplomat's multifaceted eyes took in the scene before them. "Your actions today have given us much to consider," Zorn said, their voice carrying a note of respect. "I am calling for an emergency session of the Galactic Council delegation. We must address the implications of these events." As Joseph prepared to face this new challenge, he couldn't help but feel that they stood on the brink of a new era in human-Deltan relations. The dangers they had faced and overcome together had opened up possibilities he had never imagined. With Uko by his side and Dr. Voss's groundbreaking research in hand, Joseph knew that their testimony would shape the future of interspecies cooperation for generations to come. The immediate crisis had passed, but the real work was just beginning. Joseph stood before the Galactic Council delegation, his skin still faintly glowing from the recent events. The chamber buzzed with tension and anticipation as he concluded his testimony, detailing the harrowing experiences aboard the research station. As the delegates began their deliberations, Joseph found himself drawn to Uko. Her eyes met his, a silent understanding passing between them. The shared ordeal had forged a connection that transcended their biological differences. In the weeks that followed, Joseph and Uko were at the forefront of a newly formed interspecies task force. Their unique experiences made them invaluable assets in navigating the complex landscape of human-Deltan relations. One evening, as they worked late in a private conference room, Joseph noticed a change in Uko's demeanor. Her skin began to pulse with an intense luminescence, far brighter than anything he had witnessed before. "Uko, are you all right?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. She gripped the edge of the table, her breath coming in short gasps. "Joseph, I can't resist any longer," Uko managed to say, her voice trembling. "The thing between your legs, I need it. Now." Taken aback by her sudden outburst, Joseph's mind raced. He quickly activated his communicator, contacting Dr. Voss. Within minutes, the doctor burst into the room, followed by a medical team. Dr. Voss's eyes widened as she took in the scene. "It's as I feared," she said, her voice tight with urgency. "Uko's exposure to human pheromones has triggered a rare Deltan mating cycle. If left unfulfilled, it could cause severe health complications." Joseph's heart pounded as he processed this information. "What can we do?" he asked, looking from Uko to Dr. Voss. The doctor's expression was grave. "There's only one solution, Joseph. You need to mate with Uko. It's the only way to stabilize her condition." A tense silence fell over the room. Joseph looked at Uko, seeing the pain and desperation in her eyes. He took a deep breath, understanding the weight of the decision before him. "I'll do it," he said firmly. "What do we need to do?" Dr. Voss nodded, her team already moving into action. "We've prepared a specialized medical chamber for situations like this. We'll monitor your vitals throughout the process to ensure both of your safety." As they were led to the chamber, Joseph felt a mix of apprehension and a strange sense of anticipation. The door sealed behind them with a soft hiss, leaving them in a sterile, dimly lit room. Uko's skin pulsed with an otherworldly glow, her eyes locked onto Joseph's. As they came together, a brilliant flash of bioluminescence engulfed them both. Joseph felt a surge of energy coursing through his body, unlike anything he had experienced before. Outside the chamber, Dr. Voss and her team watched in amazement as the monitoring equipment registered unprecedented levels of genetic activity. "This is extraordinary," she muttered, her fingers flying over the control panel. "Their DNA is recombining?" Hours passed, the glow within the chamber gradually subsiding. When the door finally opened, Joseph and Uko emerged, their appearance subtly altered. Joseph's skin now held a permanent, soft shimmer, while Uko's features had taken on distinctly human characteristics. Dr. Voss approached them, her face a mixture of awe and scientific curiosity. "You've undergone a complete genetic recombination," she explained, showing them the results on her data pad. "You're now perfect hybrids of human and Deltan physiology." The news spread quickly through the station, then across the galaxy. Humans and Deltans alike were captivated by the implications of this unprecedented transformation. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session to discuss the potential ramifications. In the following days, Joseph and Uko found themselves at the center of a media frenzy. Scientists clamored to study their new hybrid physiology, while diplomats saw opportunities for fostering peace through biological compatibility. Admiral Krath, who had been in custody since the terrorist attack, watched from his cell as his anti-human movement crumbled. The majority of Deltans, inspired by Joseph and Uko's transformation, embraced the new era of interspecies cooperation. Many volunteered for compatibility studies, eager to explore the possibilities of human-Deltan hybridization. As the galactic community grappled with these seismic shifts, Joseph and Uko worked tirelessly to navigate the complex political and social landscape. Their unique status as hybrids gave them unparalleled insight into both human and Deltan perspectives. One morning, as they prepared for another round of meetings and interviews, Joseph caught Uko's eye. "Are you ready for this?" he asked, taking her hand. Uko smiled, her hybrid features glowing softly. "With you by my side, I'm ready for anything. Together, they stepped out to face the cameras and the questions, their entwined hands a symbol of a new era in galactic history. As they approached the podium, Joseph took a deep breath, knowing that their next words would shape the future of interspecies relations for generations to come.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.